The sun hung low in the sky, casting a thick orange glow over the desolate highway. The road stretched endlessly, a forgotten ribbon through the barren landscape. Dust kicked up with every car that passed, but no one stopped. The sound of tires on asphalt was the only companion to the lonely figure crouched in the ditch beside the road. His fur was matted, his ribs visible beneath the dirt, and his eyes, those deep, sorrowful eyes, told a story that words never could. They were the eyes of someone who had known hunger, abandonment, and despair, yet there was a flicker of hope left. It wasn't a bright, flashy hope, but the quiet kind that refuses to die, no matter how many storms rage. As a truck zoomed past, a gust of wind tugged at his thin coat, and he whimpered softly, as if asking, "Why hasn't anyone noticed me yet?" He was a stray, starving, alone, and yet, in the depths of his pain, there was an unmistakable resilience, a will to survive, to keep going, even when the world around him seemed indifferent. His eyes met the horizon one last time, just as the sound of a car engine grew louder, pulling into view. Maybe, just maybe, this time someone would see him. Maybe this time someone would stop. The sky, a canvas of gray, hung heavy over the desolate road, where the world seemed to have disappeared. The wind carried the faint scent of burnt rubber and dust, whispering through the lifeless landscape. A stray dog lay motionless by the roadside, its ribs sharp beneath its matted fur, eyes glazed, staring into the abyss of nothingness. The quiet was suffocating. Only the distant hum of passing cars broke the stillness. His body, frail and broken, was a testament to the unrelenting cruelty of the world. Starving, alone, his spirit was crumbling, but in the hollow depth of his eyes there was still something. A flicker of hope. He didn't know how long he'd been here. Days, maybe weeks. The world had ignored him. The constant ache of hunger gnawed at him, but it wasn't the hunger for food that consumed him the most. It was the ache for warmth, for love, for connection. His tail, once strong, now lay limp, no longer responding to the faintest sound or movement. Yet, as the shadows grew longer, a soft sound caught his attention, a car engine. His heart, fragile as it was, skipped a beat. Could it be someone who cared? Someone who might see him, truly see him? His eyes shimmered faintly, like a flicker of a flame in the dark. The car slowed as it approached the broken creature. Inside, the woman didn't know what to expect when she glanced out of the window. She'd seen stray dogs before, more than she could count on her fingers. But there was something about him. The stillness of his form, the way he lay there, as though the world had crushed him completely, made her blood run cold. She stopped the car, heart pounding in her chest. Her mind wrestled with the thought. She couldn't leave him there. She wouldn't. But the idea of getting out, of getting too close, made her breath catch in her throat. She couldn't risk it. She had too much on her plate already. The voice inside her head, logical, cold, told her to drive on, that it wasn't her problem. But then she saw those eyes. His eyes weren't just asking for help, they were pleading. And the weight of that silence settled deep within her. The woman stepped out of the car. The gravel crunched beneath her shoes as she approached the dog cautiously, her heart a wild rhythm in her chest. Her hand trembled when she reached out to touch him, the fur matted and caked in dirt. His breath came in shallow, broken gasps. She knelt beside him, whispering softly, "Hey, buddy, it's okay. You're safe now." The words sounded hollow even to her. But somehow in those fleeting moments something stirred inside her. This dog, this broken, starving soul, was no different from herself. Both of them had been battered by the world. Both of them were searching for something. Anything that could heal the wounds they'd been dealt. The ride to the shelter was silent, save for the soft, strained breaths of the dog. She could feel the heaviness of his body against hers, fragile and weak. She wasn't sure how long he'd been out there, or how he had even survived. The woman kept her hands on the wheel, eyes on the road, but her mind wandered. She had no idea how she would handle this. The shelter was full, underfunded, barely scraping by. There was no room for him. There was barely room for anyone. But she couldn't ignore him. Not after everything she had seen in his eyes. She parked the car, her pulse quickening. As she opened the door and stepped out, she could hear the faint whimpering from the back seat. A sound that carried all the pain, all the sorrow of the world. She felt the pull of something greater than herself, an invisible thread that seemed to connect her to this animal, this being who had been forgotten by the world. A nurse at the shelter greeted her, eyes widening as she saw the condition of the dog. They moved quickly, almost instinctively, assessing the animal's injuries, his state of starvation, and the weight of his suffering. His body had been ravaged by time, but it was his spirit that had nearly been crushed beyond repair. Yet there was still life in his eyes, faint, flickering, but life nonetheless. As they worked to revive him, the woman stood in the corner, arms folded across her chest. She watched as the dog's breathing steadied, and the tremors in his body began to subside. The room was filled with the steady hum of machines, the sounds of life trying to hold on. She wanted to leave. She wanted to walk out of that room and pretend she hadn't just changed her life and his forever. But she couldn't. This was her moment, her choice, her fight for something bigger than herself. Days passed, and the dog, whom they'd come to call Charlie, started to improve. Slowly, painstakingly, he regained his strength. The woman visited him every day, sitting beside his cage, talking to him softly, letting her presence be his anchor. She didn't expect anything in return, but each time their eyes met, she saw the beginning of something new. Not just in him, but in herself. There was a bond forming, one she hadn't expected, one that was raw and unspoken, but so tangible that it filled the room. Charlie's progress was slow. His fur grew back, healthier now, softer than it had been before. But it wasn't just his body that was healing. Every day, he seemed to trust a little more, respond a little more. The woman saw it in his eyes, felt it in the way he would nuzzle into her when she sat by his side, his head resting on her lap. In those quiet moments, the woman realized that she wasn't just giving him something. She was receiving too. She was learning to trust again, learning to open her heart to something beyond her pain, her fear. She had saved him, yes, but in return, he was teaching her how to heal. Months passed, and Charlie had transformed. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living, running through fields, his tail wagging with joy. His eyes sparkled with the playful spirit that had once been buried beneath layers of hurt. He had found his place, his family, and so had she. The woman looked at him, standing beside her now, the bond between them unspoken but deeply felt. He had come to her in his darkest hour, but together they had found the light. And as they stood there, the evening sun casting long shadows across the field, she realized that in saving him, she had saved herself too. Her heart, once fractured, now beat in rhythm with his, and in his eyes she saw the reflection of her own journey. From the depths of despair to the height of joy, from loneliness to the warmth of connection. And as the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings, she knew that she wasn't alone anymore. Neither of them were. It was one of those quiet mornings where the world seemed to pause, holding its breath. Charlie, now with a soft, glossy coat and a body brimming with newfound strength, sat by the window, watching the world outside. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting patterns of light and shadow on the floor. The woman, now more accustomed to the rhythm of her life with him, moved slowly around the house, the warmth of their home a stark contrast to the cold streets they had both come from. She paused, watching him, the sound of his soft panting filling the room. There was a peace about him now, something unspoken, but profoundly present. He no longer carried the ghost of hunger in his eyes. His body, once fragile, was now full of life. But it wasn't just his body that had healed. It was something deeper, something intangible. His heart had found a home, and his spirit had been nurtured back to life. The woman's gaze lingered on him, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope ignite in her own chest. The kind of hope that doesn't just survive, it grows. And it spreads like a seed planted in the darkest soil. She had rescued him, yes. But in doing so, she had given herself a chance at happiness, at healing. Their bond wasn't just one of mutual rescue. It was a quiet, profound love born from the rubble of both their pasts. As she stepped closer, her fingers brushed through his fur, and he looked up at her with those familiar eyes. They had once carried the weight of despair, but now they sparkled with joy, trust, and gratitude. He had come from the edge of death's door, but here in her presence he had found something that kept him alive. Not just the food, the shelter, or the care, but the love that had slowly woven its way into both their lives. Life moved forward, quietly, steadily. Days bled into nights, The seasons turning like the pages of a book neither of them could ever quite finish. Together they had learned the art of living, of finding meaning in small moments. The mornings where Charlie would nudge her awake with a soft whine, his tail wagging as the sun's first rays painted the world in gold. The evenings spent walking through the quiet streets, the sound of their footsteps blending with the hum of the world. Each step they took together felt like a moment of silent victory, a testament to their shared strength. But it wasn't always easy. There were days when Charlie's old fears crept back in, when he would flinch at loud noises or freeze at unfamiliar sights. On those days, the woman would sit with him, patiently, reassuring him with her presence. She understood now that healing was not a linear journey. It wasn't a destination but a process, one that required time, trust, and patience. And as she watched him slowly grow more confident, more at ease in his new life, she realized that she was changing too. The woman who had once been consumed by the shadows of her past, the woman who had hidden from the world, afraid to connect, was now stepping out of those shadows. She had found something in Charlie, in their shared journey, that had rekindled the fire in her soul. She was no longer the woman she had been before. She had become something more, something stronger. One late afternoon, as the golden light bathed the room in a warm embrace, the woman stood at the door, watching Charlie play in the yard. He was chasing a ball, his body swift and graceful, his energy boundless. The woman felt the quiet stir of emotions rise in her chest. She had come so far, they both had. As Charlie bounded toward her, tail wagging, his mouth open in a joyful grin, she felt a sudden, overwhelming wave of gratitude. For all the pain, all the sorrow, and all the loss, this moment, this simple moment, was the one that mattered most. It was the one they had both fought for. She crouched down to meet him, her arms wrapping around his warm body, pulling him close. He nuzzled her face with a gentle whine, his eyes looking up at her with all the love in the world. The bond between them had been forged in the fire of hardship, but it had transformed into something beautiful, something that neither time nor distance could ever break. There were no words needed between them, none at all. The connection they shared transcended language, transcended explanation. It was a silent promise made in the quiet of their hearts, a promise that no matter what happened, they would always find each other, always. And as she held him, she realized that the road they had traveled, both the one that had led them to each other and the one they had yet to walk, was the one that truly defined them. Not the pain they had endured, not the fear they had faced, but the way they had chosen to heal together. In this moment, she understood fully. It wasn't the destination that mattered, but the journey. And with Charlie by her side, she knew that no matter where the road would lead, they would walk it together. It was on a quiet evening, months after that first rescue, when the woman found herself sitting in the same spot by the window, watching Charlie sleep peacefully beside her. The world outside was still, the soft glow of streetlights casting long shadows on the pavement. The quiet hum of the night felt like a lullaby, a gentle reminder that they had made it, together. She looked down at Charlie, his body curled into a small, trusting ball beside her, his breathing slow and steady. His journey from starvation, fear, and loneliness to this moment of peace was nothing short of miraculous. And in his calm presence, the woman felt a sense of peace, too. Her fingers gently brushed through his fur as she whispered softly, "We made it, buddy." Together. Charlie shifted slightly, nuzzling deeper into her lap, his eyes still closed, his trust unshaken. And as the woman sat there, in the quiet of the night, she realized that this was her home now. Not just the house they shared, but the bond they had built, one that was rooted in love, resilience, and the quiet understanding that sometimes the road home isn't just about where you are. It's about who you walk it with. And in that moment, as the night wrapped its arms around them, both, the woman and her dog, two souls once lost, knew they had found something beautiful in each other, something worth fighting for, something worth living for. Their journey had begun on a lonely road, but it had ended in a place of light, a place of love. And that was all that mattered. The air felt different now, brighter, heavier with promise. The woman and Charlie had settled into a rhythm of everyday life, a life that was defined not by the past, but by the present, by the gentle moments they shared together. Their mornings were calm, filled with the soft sound of the coffee maker bubbling in the kitchen, and the steady patter of Charlie's paws as he followed her around, ever so close, ever so loyal. There was no longer the weight of the past between them. Instead, there was just today. One morning, after a particularly long walk through the park, the woman found herself sitting on a bench, Charlie lying beside her with his head resting on her knee. The breeze played with her hair, and the scent of blooming flowers hung in the air. For a moment, the world felt vast, endless even, yet strangely she was completely at peace. There was no longer any fear, no more wondering if they had made the right choice. Everything had unfolded so beautifully, so naturally, that it seemed almost inevitable. It was as though their souls had always been meant to find each other. As she watched Charlie bask in the sunlight, his eyes half closed in contentment, she thought of the long road ahead. They had both come so far, and there was still so much to experience together. It was hard to imagine a time when she hadn't known him, hard to imagine life without his warm presence beside her. The bond they had created, silent but unbreakable, had woven itself into every corner of her heart. And in that moment, as she looked at him, she knew that the future wasn't something to fear. No matter what happened, they would face it together. That was the promise, the truth that she held in her heart. The love they had found wasn't fragile, it was strong, resilient, forged in the fires of their past struggles. And now, it would carry them through whatever lay ahead. Time flowed like a river, carving new paths, smoothing old ones. Days turned into months, months into years. And through it all, Charlie and the woman remained a constant. What had begun as an act of kindness, an unspoken vow of protection, had evolved into something deeper, more essential. They were more than just rescuer and rescued, they were family. A bond that transcended all the labels and expectations the world had placed upon them. One afternoon, while Charlie lay on the porch, his eyes following the fluttering leaves in the breeze, the woman stepped outside, cradling a box in her hands. She had been working on this for months, piecing it together, brick by brick, like a dream coming true. Inside the box were the blueprints for their new life, the life they would share, the life they had earned. They had always dreamed of a garden, of space to run, of room for new memories. And today, that dream was becoming a reality. Charlie's tail wagged as she approached, his eyes watching her with the same undying loyalty, the same love that had always been there. She crouched down beside him, her heart swelling with pride, with gratitude. "We did it, buddy. We really did it." The warmth of the moment washed over her as she stood, feeling the solid earth beneath her feet. The house, the garden, the land, everything was falling into place. It was a dream built on the foundation of love and trust, and every corner of it felt like a home made for them. Charlie, his energy never waning, bounded forward, running circles around her. His bark echoed in the air, a sound filled with joy and freedom. His transformation had been nothing short of miraculous, but she knew it wasn't just his transformation that had mattered. It was hers as well. They had both healed, both found a new purpose in each other. As they walked through the garden together side by side, Charlie stopped to sniff the flowers, his nose brushing the petals gently. The woman smiled softly, her hand resting on his back. The world felt full, complete. For the first time in a long while, she realized that the road they had traveled together was a road worth walking, long, winding, and uncertain at times. But ultimately, it had led them to this peace, to this love. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold, the woman whispered softly to Charlie, "Home." And with that single word, everything was perfect. Years passed, and Charlie grew older. His coat, once sleek and vibrant, had begun to show signs of age, a little graying around the muzzle, a slower step in his gait. But his spirit, his unwavering spirit, remained as strong as ever. And for the woman, there was no one else she could imagine spending her life with. On one particularly quiet evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, the woman thought of everything that had led them here. The pain, the loss, the moments of doubt and fear. But all of it had been worth it, because in the end they had found each other. "Charlie," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "you've given me everything." His head turned toward her, his eyes soft, understanding. He leaned against her gently, his body warm against hers. She stroked his fur, taking in the scent of him, the familiar comfort of his presence. They had lived a lifetime together, a lifetime full of love, joy, and the kind of quiet contentment that only comes after surviving the storm. The years ahead felt uncertain, but she didn't fear them anymore. Whatever came, they would face it with the strength they had built together. And when the time came for Charlie to leave, as it inevitably would, she would be ready. Because love was eternal. It wasn't something that ended with the body, with time. It lived in the heart, in the soul, and in the quiet memories shared between two hearts that had found their way to each other. As the light faded, leaving only the soft glow of dusk, the woman held Charlie close. His breathing, steady and rhythmic, was a reminder of everything they had been through. He wasn't just a dog. He was a part of her, woven into the very fabric of her being. And as the stars began to twinkle in the sky above, the woman closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his presence one last time. Their journey had come full circle. From the lonely road to this moment of peace, they had created a life worth living. And that was enough. The days of running through the garden together, of laughing in the sun, had slowed down. Charlie, now older and wiser in the ways of time, seemed to feel a shift in his bones. His steps weren't as light, his eyes a little dimmer. But still, his tail would wag when she came into the room, that simple act always reminding her of the immense love they shared. It was a quiet morning when it happened. The sun, still hidden behind a curtain of gray clouds, struggled to break through mist that hung in the air. The world felt muted, as though the earth itself was waiting, holding its breath. Charlie, once so energetic and always by her side, lay in his favorite spot on the porch, his eyes gazing at her, but with an expression that carried a heaviness, a wisdom beyond his years. She could feel it, the subtle change in the air. She had seen it coming, in the way his body seemed to rest more than usual, in the slower rhythm of his breaths. But no matter how much she prepared herself for this moment, she wasn't ready. She knelt beside him, her fingers brushing his fur, the familiar softness now feeling like something more fragile. "Charlie," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. He turned his head to look at her, his eyes still bright with recognition, but there was something deeper in them now, something serene. It was as if he knew that the time had come. Time for him to rest, to move on to a place where was no more pain. "I love you," she murmured, her heart breaking with each word. "You've been my whole world." Charlie's tail gave one last gentle wag. A quiet acknowledgement, a final gift, a reminder that their bond, built on shared suffering, love, and healing, would never fade. And then, with a soft exhale, Charlie closed his eyes, his body relaxing into the earth beneath him. The world around them remained still, as if honoring this moment of quiet release. The sun finally pierced through the clouds, its rays casting a gentle, golden glow over them. It was as though the heavens themselves had given their blessing, wrapping Charlie in a final, warm embrace. In the days that followed, the house felt quieter, emptier. The garden, once filled with the sound of Charlie's joyful barks, now seemed still. The woman found herself sitting on the porch, her hands resting in her lap, staring at the spot where he had lain. It was as though the space itself had shifted, a part of her gone with him. But as the days passed, something began to change. The pain, raw and immediate, began to soften. The tears that came in waves, unexpected and uncontrollable, started to dry, and in their place, precious memories began to bloom. She remembered how he had nuzzled her after a long day, how he had danced in circles in the rain, how his presence had been the most comforting thing in her life. Charlie had given her so much more than she could have ever given him. He had been her anchor, her solace in times of grief, and her reminder that love, true unbreakable love, didn't require words. It lived in the silence, in the way they shared space, in the moments they had fought through together. And in that quiet, the woman began to understand that his love had not left her. It was woven into the fabric of her being. Every walk, every moment of peace, every shared breath, they had created a life together, and that life would stay with her forever. No one could take that away. Not time, not loss, not even the inevitability of death. Charlie had been her first love in a way, the first being who had asked nothing from her, yet had given her everything. The woman slowly returned to the rhythm of life. Her mornings were no longer just silent reflections of what had been, but new moments filled with purpose and the weight of Charlie's love. She found herself reaching for the leash almost instinctively before remembering he was gone. Yet, there was no sadness in the action. It was a tribute to him, her way of keeping him close even when the world had shifted, when their shared path had reached its end. And in the quiet of the garden, where his paws had once run freely, she began a plan with him. Each bloom, each leaf, was a small piece of him, a way to honor what they had shared. She planted marigolds, his favorite, the bright colors reminding her of his energy, his unwavering spirit. With each new step, she found that life could still move forward. It was different now, but it was still worth living. The house, once so empty, had found its rhythm again. And though the hole in her heart would never truly heal, it no longer felt like a wound. It had become a place for memories, both painful and beautiful. Charlie's spirit lived on in every corner of the life they had built. In the garden, in the quiet mornings, in the soft whispers of the wind. His love, his presence, remained eternal. It had been a love forged in hardship, but it had grown into something pure, something unbreakable. And so, the woman learned to live on, carrying his spirit with her, always. He had taught her to love fearlessly, to face every challenge with grace, and to never forget that in the end, it wasn't the struggles that defined us. It was the love we gave and received, and that love would never die. It was a morning like any other, yet it felt as though everything had changed. The sun was struggling to break through the early morning mist, casting long shadows across the yard. Charlie had been with her through it all, the loneliness, the emptiness, the uncertainty, and now, in his quiet, patient way, he had left her, leaving behind an irreplaceable silence. The woman sat in the same chair by the window where they had spent countless mornings together. The garden outside was the same, yet it felt so different. The winds that once carried his joy now whispered a quiet melancholy. She had been through the motions of grief before, loss, sorrow, the deep ache of absence, but this was something else. Charlie had been more than a pet. He had been her constant companion, her friend, her family. When he had first entered her life, he was just a broken, starving dog, abandoned on the side of a lonely road. But in the weeks and months that followed, he became her anchor. They had learned to trust each other, to rely on each other in ways no one else could understand. He had saved her, and in doing so, he had brought her back to life. Now, she sat in the empty house, the weight of his absence heavy in the air. But even as the sadness threatened to overwhelm her, there was something else. A quiet realization, a soft understanding. She wasn't alone anymore. He had given her everything she needed to move forward. His love had been her greatest gift, and even in his passing, he had left her with the strength to keep going. She stood up, her fingers lightly brushing the edge of his favorite blanket, still resting on the couch where he used to sleep. She walked outside into the garden, her eyes falling on the spot where Charlie used to play, where his joyful bark had once filled the air. It was strange how something so full of life could leave behind such an absence. Yet, as she stood there, her gaze shifting to the flowers she had planted in his memory, she realized that this garden, this life they had built, was a testament to their shared journey. It wasn't just a place of loss, it was a place of love, of healing, of growth. The marigolds Charlie had once chased in the summer breeze now bloomed with branch and yellow petals, their vivid colors like a reflection of his spirit. Joyful, alive, impossible to forget. She knelt down beside the flowers, her fingers gently caressing the petals. Each bloom, each leaf, seemed to hold a piece of him. It was as though, in the simplest moments, his spirit still lingered, still filled the space they had shared. The pain of his loss was still there, deep and raw, but now it felt like something she could live with. Grief was no longer a constant companion. Instead, it had become a part of the tapestry of her life, woven into the very fabric of who she had become. She wasn't the woman she had been when they first met. She had grown, just as he had. And as she stood in the garden, looking around at the life they had built together, she felt a deep sense of peace settle in her chest. "Thank you, Charlie," she whispered softly to the wind, as though he could hear her from wherever he was. "Thank you for everything." The house, once silent and empty, now felt alive with his memory. It wasn't the house that had changed. It was her. She had learned to live again, to open her heart to the world, to let love in, even when it seemed impossible. Charlie had shown her what it meant to give and receive love unconditionally, to face each day with courage and grace, no matter what the world threw at her. As the seasons shifted, so did the rhythms of life. The days no longer felt like a constant battle. There were still moments of sadness, of longing for his presence beside her, but they were fleeting now. The woman found herself waking up to mornings filled with the sounds of birds singing, the soft rustle of leaves in the wind, and the gentle light of the sun streaming through the windows. It wasn't the same, but it was enough. It was beautiful in its own way. She had learned that life didn't need to be perfect to be worth living. All it took was the courage to keep moving forward, to embrace the love that remained, and to find joy in the simplest moments. One day, as the woman walked through the park, something she hadn't done in months, she noticed a small, scrappy dog sitting by the path, its coat matted and eyes filled with a quiet sadness. It wasn't Charlie, but in that moment she felt an unexplainable pull in her chest. The dog's eyes were empty, just like Charlie's had been when she first found him. And without thinking, she knelt down beside it, offering the same comfort, the same tenderness she had once offered Charlie. It wasn't a replacement. No one could ever replace him. But in that moment, the woman realized something important. She had learned to love again, to care for another soul who needed her just as much as Charlie had. And maybe that was the truest gift he had given her, the ability to keep her heart open, even after all the pain. As she led the small dog home, her heart felt full. She wasn't erasing the past, nor was she trying to forget Charlie. But life had a way of moving forward, and she had learned to walk with it. The love she had for Charlie would never fade. It would live in her heart forever, a constant reminder that love, in all its forms, was worth every tear, every moment of heartache. And through it all, she had learned that the greatest gift we can give and receive is love, and that love, once given, never truly fades. It lives on in the memories we cherish, in the lives we touch, and in the love we continue to share.